Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's hearing. We're going to hear another firefighter witness today, Mr. Welch, I think.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman. May I now please call Group Manager Richard Welch?
Thank you.
The evidence I shall give
shall be the
truth,
the whole
truth,
and nothing but
the truth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Welch. Yes, just a minute.
Mr. Welch, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please give the inquiry your full name?
Richard Frederick Welch.
And can I start by saying thank you very much to you for coming here and giving evidence to the inquiry and helping us with our investigations. It's very much appreciated. If any of my questions are incomprehensible to you, I'm very happy to put the question again or ask the question in a different way. Just all you have to do is ask me. And if you need a break at any time, just signal and we can take a break. First of all, can I ask you to take your two statements, please, which will either be in front of you in a small bundle or, more conveniently, on the screen on the desk to your right, which is where it's best to look at them, or displayed on the screens at the back of the room. The first one is dated the 5th of July 2017, and that is MET quadruple 07525. And the second one is dated the 30th of March 2018, and that is MET 000013007. Have you read both of those statements recently?
Yes, I have.
You have. Can you confirm for us that the contents are true and accurate?
There are actually two inaccuracies in the first statement and one in the second statement.
Right, okay. Well, if I don't pick those up, someone will remind me of them. We may find that there are more than that.
Okay.
Perhaps we can cover those now. If you want to look at the first statement, which is the inaccuracy?
The first one is in a statement where it says I was informed of a 10-pump fire initially. I believe that to be actually an 8-pump fire that I was informed of.
Right. Well, we'll come to that, I think.
Yeah,
Thank you.
The second one was within my statement. It says that the Asian male was rescued at 0800 hours, and I believe that to be 0600 hours.
0600 hours. Again, thank you very much. And in the second statement?
In the second statement, I state that I was informed the change of stay put policy at 0800, and I believe that to be 0300.
I was going to ask you about that, and that's clarified that already. Thank you very much. But subject to those corrections that you very helpfully just made, can you confirm again that the contents are true and accurate?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Have you discussed your statements or your evidence that you're going to give to us with anybody today before coming here?
As a core participant, I have discussed it with the legal team appointed to me by the Fire Officers Association, the events of the night, but not the evidence I intend to give today.
Right. Now, you are a borough commander for Lambeth.
I was, no longer.
What are you now?
I'm now Deputy Assistant Commissioner.
When were you promoted?
On the 1st of November 2017.
Right. And as at the 14th of June 2017, you were a borough commander for Lambeth.
That's correct.
Your call sign, I think, was E109.
That's correct.
Is it still your call? Is that still your call sign?
No, it's now Echo 5.
It's now E5, Echo 5, I see. As at the 14th of June 2017, you had been, I think, an employee of the LFB for some 22 years.
That's correct.
And it was all of that frontline service?
Yes.
You explain in your witness statement, your first witness statement, in the first main paragraph, that because of the areas you've been based in, and I'm summarising, because of the areas you've been based in as borough commander, in particular Newham and Tower Hamlets in London, you have had a lot of experience of high-rise fires. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And in terms of high-rise training that you've received or delivered, can you tell us in general terms, first of all, whether any of that has covered the specific subject of ignition of the facade of a building, a high-rise building?
No. Not that I'm aware of.
No. And has any of the training that you've received or delivered covered the ignition and fire spread over cladding on the exterior of a building?
Again, not that I recall, no.
Have you ever given or received training in strategies for either full or partial evacuation of a high-rise residential block?
As part of our high-rise policy, then we do consider full evacuation of a building, but that's usually of a commercial building, not necessarily residential.
Right. Have you ever done, let's start with a practical training exercise. Have you ever done a practical training exercise involving full or partial evacuation of a high-rise residential block?
Not that I recall.
Right. Do you know of circumstances in which you would consider implementing an evacuation of a high-rise residential building which had a stay-put policy in place?
From operational knowledge, it would be that if the stay-put policy is no longer effective, then we would move to removing that and evacuating the building, if possible.
Have you ever had an experience as an operational frontline officer of a time when the stay-put policy was, as you put it, no longer effective?
No.
No. Apart from Grenfell Tower?
Apart from Grenfell Tower.
Do you ever recall seeing or receiving any training on something called a tall buildings facade slideshow?
I've become aware of it recently, but I don't recall ever receiving training on it, no.
Okay, just so we're clear, we can put up the front page. It's tab 10 of the master documents bundle, and it's LFB. Well, there it is. Got there first. Tall buildings facade. Well, it carries the date of the 30th of July 2016 on that. That's, I think, a draft. The actual date, we're told that it was finalised and disseminated in the LFB was October 2016.
Not that I don't recall.
You've not seen that before. No. Right. Now, if you look at the first paragraph on page 1 of your statement and look at the first, look at the end of the last, the last sentence on that paragraph. Other training of note, you say, is that I am a qualified breathing apparatus instructor, BAI. Does that mean that you are qualified to train firefighters on the use of both SDBA, standard, and EDBA, extended breathing apparatus? You are. And again, in general terms, are you able to tell us when you would need to use EDBA specifically at an incident rather than SDBA?
EDBA would normally be used when there's extensive travel distances. So to summarise, it really would be that when someone is required to travel further and stay longer at an incident, but not usually for firefighting.
Have you ever had an experience where you needed to deploy large numbers of EDBA wearers into a tower block?
No.
Is there any training available, or was there any training available as of June 2017 on that kind of activity? Mass deployment of EDBA wearers into a tower block?
Not to the extent that we used at Grenfell Tower, no.
Right. Now, I want to turn to your mobilisation and journey to Grenfell on the night of the fire. If you turn to page 2 of your statement, please, your first statement. I'd like you to go to 11 lines off the bottom of that page. And you say that, and it's not that easy to find, it's just below halfway down. You say, I went to bed around midnight, and then at 01:18 hours on 14th June 2017, I received a pager message informing me of a fire at flat 16, 4th floor, Grenfell Tower, with 6 pumps attending, but also requesting an aerial and making it persons reported. Now, you say you got that at 01:18 hours. When you did this statement, were you looking at a document in order to get that time?
No, that was the time that was recorded on my pager.
I see.
But it is possible at the time on the pager could be inaccurate.
That was on your pager. I see. Okay. Now, we've got a recorded time for your pager message that was sent to you in the short incident log. And I wonder if I can just ask you to be shown that, please. At page 13. On that page, we see just below halfway down the list of officers attending the incident, and we see your name about a third of the way down that list, E109 Richard Welch. Welch Richard. Do you see that?
Yes, I can.
14th of June 2017, assigned at 1:19:27. Would that be the time that you were paged informing you of the incident at Grenfell Tower?
Yeah, I would say this.
You'd
Yes.
accept that. And now you say in your statement, just going back, we'll come back to the short incident log a number of times, I think, during the course of today, but just put that on one side for the moment. Going back to your statement, you say that you were told in the request, and this is 3/4 of the way down the page, that you would probably be needed to attend in my role, you say, as bulk media advisor, BMA. You say probably. Was that was your estimation or understanding, was it?
Yes, so when there's 6 appliances at an incident, the bulk media, it's your call whether you think you're needed, depending on what the incident is. But once it becomes 8 appliances, then your attendance is compulsory.
And if you go back to the short incident log at page 17, and look please at the time stamp of 01:21:33, it says agency, E109 GM Welch paged as TAB or TAB. What does TAB stand for?
That's the code used at control. It's Tactical Advisor Bulk.
Tactical Advisor Bulk. Is that the same as Bulk Media Advisor?
Yes.
Okay, and you go on to say in your statement, main statement, at page 2, halfway down the page, and I'm sorry, we're jumping around because it jumps around a bit. You say, as group manager, I carry an additional tag to Borough Commander, which is Bulk Media Advisor. It's exactly halfway down the page. Responsible for the large delivery stroke removal of water at incidents. This means that I am notified of any incident where 6 pumps are requested and I can choose whether I need to attend. But if 8 or more pumps are requested, then I am required to attend. Just focusing on what you say about responsible for the large delivery or removal of water at incidents there, Mr. Welch. Can you explain to us in layman's terms what that means?
So if there's lots of appliances there which are using a large amount of water, or aerial appliances which use a large amount of water, then bulk media advisor's role is to advise the incident commander on the best configuration to get the most amount of water out of the hydrant or wherever the water source is available. But the removal part is related to floodings. So if we need to remove a lot of water from an area, then we'll also get involved to help the incident commander, advise the incident commander on how to do that.
I see. Is one of the tasks to remove water which has been applied by the brigade?
Only if it causes flooding.
Right.
Usually, in most circumstances, they'll run away naturally, but if it causes flooding, we can assist with that.
I see. And would your role also cover dealing with any kind of issues about water pressure
Yes.
at an incident? It
Yes.
would. So if there were water pressure issues at Grenfell Tower, you would be the officer in charge of sorting those issues out, would you?
We'd be advising the incident commander on the best configuration of how to get the most amount out of the water that's available from the hydrant, working with the water board to increase the pressure if necessary, or finding larger hydrants further away where we can get the water from.
So if there were generic issues with water pressure at Grenfell Tower, would you be the officer who would be responsible for liaising with the water board?
Yes.
Right. And did you?
No, but I didn't carry out that role on the night.
Did anybody else?
There was another bulk media advisor that came later on, Station Manager Chris Paynton, I believe.
Right. I'm so sorry, could you just repeat the name again? I'm not sure we got it down.
Station Manager Chris Paynton, I believe,
Paynton,
came as
yes.
a bulk media advisor later on.
Right. Now, in the same passage of your statement, in the next part of the sentence, you say, and I've read it out already, it means you're notified of any incident where 6 pumps are requested. We've seen that on the screen. We know that by the time your pager message went at 01:19, as we've just seen, the incident at Grenfell had been made up to an 8-pump fire. And then by the time you spoke to control at 1:24, as we'll come to see, it was a 10-pump fire. My question is, at that stage, by 1:24, when you knew that it was a 10-pump fire, did you know whether other group managers had been asked to attend or told to attend?
So our mobilising policy is once we make pump 6, then we require a station manager to take over that incident, and a group manager is automatically mobilised to monitor the station manager. So my assumption would be yes, there would be a group manager attending.
Right. And looking back at your statement just below halfway down, you say you received your pager message, and we've seen this already, informing me of a fire at flat 16, 4th floor Grenfell Tower with 6 pumps attending. Was that what your pager message told you, that it was on the 4th floor?
I couldn't recall it word for word, but that's what I seem to recall, yes.
Right. Would a pager message normally tell you of the exact address or location of the fire that you were
They'll try and
attending?
give you as much information as they can on that pager message,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, you also say, and it's still page 2, and it's 8 lines up from the bottom or so. This request told me that I would probably be needed to attend this BMA, and with persons reported as well, I had already decided to attend before I called into our control room in Merton, as required where my pager message is received. Your reference there to persons reported, did you get that on the pager, do you think?
I believe so. Yeah. What we'd normally get on the page, it would just get the initial PR.
Right. Looking back at the short incident log, if I can just take you back to that. The person's reported message comes, this is page 18, the top of page 18 in the short incident log. The person's reported message comes at 01:28:40, if you just look at the top there. SAD sends a service request at 01:28:40, that's Sharon Darby. Service request created IUP G271, persons reported. So just in terms of timing, Mr. Welch, it looks as if that request was created at that stage, at least on the vision system. Do you think that you could be wrong about the pager message telling you that it was a person's reported fire?
Clearly, yeah, I think I could be wrong there.
Okay. Now, going back to your statement at page 3, you say, at 1:25, I was already in my vehicle, ready to leave, when I received a second page informing me it was now a 10-pump fire and that an aerial had been requested. I think was that the area of your statement you wanted to correct?
Well, no, because when I spoke to control, they'll tell you that it's 10-pump fire. Yeah. But then as the incident increases, they will keep paging you. So although I've spoken to them, they've told me now it's 10 pumps. Yeah. They'll still send me a pager message to let me know that.
I follow. Can I just look at page 17 then of the SIL, the short incident log, if you would. That's going back a page, and look please at the time mark of 01:24:34. You can see there that Sharon Darby, SAD is Sharon Darby, she's the radio operator, inserts into the system make-up IUP from G271 make pumps 10. So we've got the timing of that. Do you think you had left for the incident before or after the make-up to 10?
I think that was around the same kind of time, considering the time I was paged.
Okay. Now, as you started your journey, what communications equipment did you have with you?
My airwave radio.
Was it on?
Yes.
Did you hear the make-ups as you drove?
Yes.
Do you think, therefore, that it's possible that you heard the person's reported radio message as you were driving?
Yes, it seems so.
Now, going back to page 2 of your statement, we can see that, and I know this is going back in time a little bit, that you'd called into the control room. This is 3/4 of the way down page 2. And you say at the foot of the page you kept the call short. Do you remember whether you were told during that call to the control room that there were multiple calls coming in from persons trapped in the tower?
I don't recall being told that at that time when I rang in. I do recall being told that we had multiple calls,
right.
But that wasn't involving people from within the tower. It's quite usual that when we've got a large fire, we'll get lots of calls from surrounding areas from people who see it.
During that call, were you told or given the impression that any of those calls were fire survival guidance calls, even at that early stage?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Now, going back to the top of page 3 of your statement, you say, I began my journey to the incident. By the time I reached the A2, only a couple of miles from my home, I heard on my vehicle's airwave radio that pumps had been made 15. A few minutes later, I heard pumps made 20, and a few minutes after that, they were made 25. Did that rate of increase of make-ups of appliances tell you anything at that stage about the nature of the fire or its spread?
It made it very clear that the incident commander at the time had a very serious fire in front of him that was growing quickly because of the quick make-ups.
Right. Did you have any thoughts in that moment about what kind of building it was, what sort of tactics should be adopted?
Well, at that point, while I'm travelling there, I was going there as a bulk media advisor. So my thoughts were around what demands may be made on me to provide water for an incident that's growing that quickly.
Right. Did the rate of make-ups of appliances make you think that your role at the incident would be rather more than bulk media advisor, but actually perhaps be incident commander when you arrived?
That does happen, and I was aware that could happen, but Grenfell Tower is quite a distance. The travel distance to get there was quite extensive, so I didn't think I would be the first group manager to arrive, no.
I follow. Now then, you say in the next paragraph, around this time I heard control inform officers at the scene that they were receiving fire survival guidance, FSG phone calls from people in flats within Grenfell Tower and providing flat numbers and number of occupants. You say around this time, that's en route?
Yes.
Do you remember hearing actual floor numbers?
I remember them being passed across the radio, but I don't remember any specific floor numbers or flats.
You say you remember flat numbers. Do you remember any specific flat numbers?
No.
Are you sure that flat numbers were actually being passed across the radio?
I seem to recall those flat numbers being passed across the radio, but throughout most of my journey, that information was being given.
Right.
But obviously, concentrating on driving on a blue light and trying to concentrate on the sat-nav, I was aware that they were coming in, but I wasn't going there as incident commander, so I wasn't trying to recall those figures, those numbers.
Right. Do you have a recollection of having any particular impression of whether these calls were coming from anywhere particular in the building,
no.
High up or low down?
I don't remember that at all.
Okay. Now, we can just take a sample or two of these. We'll take this very quickly. If you go to page 18, please, of the short incident log. Just to make sure we've got this clear, and turn to, on page 18, look at the time mark of 01:31:38. This is a service request made by Pete Duddy. RT4, so it was made by radio. G271, further call to save fire on 20th floor, also people trapped. Now, I think you were en route at that point. Do you remember, or does that trigger a recollection in your
Only
mind?
of general messages I was hearing, not of specifics.
In terms of general messages you were hearing, did you get the impression that there were repeated calls about the same flats or same floors?
I don't remember that.
Did you get the impression that there were people trapped on high floors, even at that early stage?
It was clear that there were people trapped by the fact that they were making fire survival guidance, but I don't recall what floors they were on.
Right. And then, if you go back to your statement, please, and look at page 3 towards the bottom of the page, you say, it's 3/4 of the way down, as I came off the A40 and onto the West Cross route, I started paying more attention to my sat-nav to guide me in. The West Cross route, just help me.
I believe that's as you come along the A40 and then you turn left down towards around about Holland Park. I believe that's the A cross.
Right.
I could be wrong, but
so where the Westfield is on the right.
Yes.
Okay. Throughout the journey, I heard more and more FSG calls coming in, and it made me feel horrible, but also focused my mind and got me to draw on my high-rise experience, which is to focus on reading the locations of the FSGs. There was minimal radio traffic back from the scene, which told me they were up against it. Now, when you say to focus on reading the locations of the FSGs, could you just explain what you mean by that?
I think it's built into us as experienced fire officers that when you do start hearing FSGs coming in, you try to remember what you can hear.
Right.
Although you know it's being recorded at the scene, but you're still trying to recall some sort of information from it.
Did you?
No, I couldn't remember the information. It's not an area I'm familiar with. I was concentrating on, as I can hear the FSGs, the urgency of getting there. And trying to find my way into the area. I may have remembered at the time. I don't recall any of that information now.
Okay. What was because you say in your statement that you were prompted to draw on your high-rise experience, which is to focus on reading the locations of FSGs. Let me ask a different question, and then come back to it. In your high-rise experience, have you ever handled multiple FSGs from a single incident?
I would say probably no more than 2 or 3 at any instant.
Right. Was handling 2 or 3 a frequent experience as a frontline officer?
Not frequent, no.
Right. Okay. But no more than 2 or 3, you say?
Yes.
Right. Coming back to, and what was the most recent incident at which you had to handle multiple FSGs prior to Grenfell Tower? Do you remember?
Probably more than 2 years ago.
Right.
Prior to the incident.
And was that a high-rise residential block?
It was, yeah. From what I can recall, it was a high-rise incident in East London.
In East London?
Yeah.
Just going back then to your statement where you say you were drawing on your high-rise experience, which is to focus on reading the locations of the FSGs. En route, did you focus on reading the locations of the FSGs?
I would have done naturally, so yes, I think I'm comfortable to say yes, but I was also aware that the information that was getting passed to the scene, it was being acknowledged by the people receiving it, so I was aware that it's being recorded. So that's comforting for an officer to know that that's being received, acknowledged, so when you get there will be a list that we can work from.
Now, you're hearing more and more FSGs coming in, or calls coming in. Do you remember having any thoughts at that time? You're still en route, quite near the incident, but did you remember having any thoughts at that time about what these FSG calls meant in terms of fire spread or smoke spread?
Well, at that point, on my journey in, after hearing the number of these calls, I actually made a phone call to Station Manager Mick Mulholland, who was the ORT officer on the night, because I knew he was the ORT officer, and I've worked closely with him before in the past. And we had a very, very brief discussion, and it was around the shock of how many calls were coming in, and we actually had a conversation, what they got, what is it?
Right.
Because it sounded quite strange.
Yes. Well, you deal with that in your statement halfway down the page. Let's just look at that. You say, when I heard about the FSG calls, this is just at the end of the second main paragraph there, Mr. Welch, you say, I phoned Mick Mulholland, Station Manager ORT, on my hands-free mobile phone. Just pausing there. Was that your brigade mobile?
Yes.
Right. He was also en route to the scene, and we had a brief conversation about how he hoped it was just a watch manager who had panicked. Was that call before or after you'd heard the more and more FSGs coming in?
I think that was.
Or during.
That was during that period, but within the first 5 to 10 minutes of my journey.
I see. Okay. Did you, at any stage during your journey, have any thoughts about whether compartmentation in this block had been breached?
No.
Did you have any thoughts about whether you needed to consider or assist in the consideration of a tactic involving evacuation at that stage?
No.
Now, you say, still on page 3 of your statement, in the third paragraph, just at the beginning, as I drove along the A40 towards the scene, I could see the glow from the building. My first thought was that the fire must have been from the netting used in scaffolded buildings. This burns very quickly, but then dies down. However, as I continued on the A40 Westway, passing traffic which had pulled over to watch, I realised there was no scaffolding on the building. So you were going east to west?
East to west, yes.
Right, on the left-hand side of the carriageway, and you had the tower block on your...
On my left.
On your left. Did you get a clear view of it, do you think, from your car?
Only as I got quite close to it. I was initially shocked to see cars that actually stopped on the A40 and pulled over on the hard shoulder to look. And just before you turn off the A40, you get quite a good, clear view of the building. That's where I realised there was no scaffolding in the building.
Right. Did you think at that stage, and I know you're still en route, but did you have any thoughts at that stage whether the calls from occupants higher up in the building reporting smoke and fire that you'd heard over your airwave radio was consistent with this being a scaffolding fire or netting fire?
It wouldn't be unusual for the public to make those calls, because the netting and scaffolding burns quite spectacularly, but for not very long. So as a resident, I could understand that would be very, very distressing and worrying, and there'd be a lot of smoke come off of it. So I wouldn't be shocked at that.
Right. But you then say, as I continued on the Westway, I realised there was no scaffolding on the building. At that moment, when you realised there was no scaffolding on the building, did you have any positive thoughts about what it actually was that was on fire?
No, I just felt chilled, because
Really?
I couldn't work out what was seeing.
Right.
And just a feeling of oh shit.
Right. That's very expressive. But
I don't know how to put it any other way, really. It was a real feeling of there's people in that building.
But just to press my question a little bit more, did you actually have any thoughts about what it actually was that was burning?
No.
Or what it might be?
At that point, when I was still driving, no, I didn't, because that was quite a quick glimpse I saw of the building. I think in the back of my mind I was thinking it looked strange, it seemed to be outside, but I was waiting until I got nearer to try and assess what it was.
Right. Then, in rough terms, do you remember how long it took you to drive to the incident?
I would estimate around 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
If you go to the short incident log at page 13, we have a status 3 time for you of 01:57:21. You can just see that there against your name. 01:57:21. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes, it does.
Right. And then if you go back to your statement and turn to page 4, you say at the very top, as I ran up Grenfell Road, I saw our command unit, CU, in Beaumont Road, and as it was protocol, I think that must be, for senior officers, I reported there first, as it is where the incident commander would usually be. Just to be clear on which CU that was, there's a map which I think we can use so that you can indicate to us where that CU was parked. It's MET, yes, that is the one, MET 000168854. Could you just indicate for us where the CU that you went to first was? We've got Grenfell Road running down to the southeast of the tower, and then where it says Cycle Hire Station, that's Beaumont Road.
Yes, that's where it was. It was CU8.
CU8?
Inside, yeah.
Oh, right, thank you. And was it on the right side of the road or the left side of the road?
If you're turning from Grenfell Road, it's on the left-hand side.
Yes, thank you. So that's CU8. Now, after you arrived at CU8, but before you checked in there, as it were, did you take a good look at the fire?
No, I didn't get a very good view of it, other than when I going into Beaumont Road, I caught a glimpse of it, but
Right.
it wasn't a clear view.
I see. But even with that glimpse, could you tell us what you saw?
Pretty much confirmed what I'd seen from the A40, which appeared like the east side of the building was largely alight.
Right. Could you see, even in that glimpse, whether the fire had penetrated from the exterior back into flats?
No.
You couldn't?
Not from there.
Did you know at that stage, before you checked in, whether you were the most senior officer at the scene?
No.
You didn't know. What assumptions did you make about who was the most senior?
Sorry. I assumed that I was attending as bulk media advisor. There'd been very few messages coming back from the scene because of the amount of pressure they were under. But I assumed that by that point it'd be at least a group manager in charge.
I see. You assumed that by that point there'd be a group manager in charge. Did you then take a step back and work out what was in front of you so that you could get a clear picture of the task that you had to perform?
Now, my priority was to get onto the command unit and let the incident commander know that I was there and ask what help he needed, or she.
Now, in your statement, you go on to say, and it's top of page 4, I was followed into the CU, which is 3 lines down from the top of page 4. I was followed into the CU by the ORT, Matthew Cook, Mick Mulholland, and Steve West. Did you all go in together as a group?
I think that I was probably just about in front, but they were with seconds behind.
I see. Okay. And where did you first see them?
On the command unit.
On the command unit. Now you go on to say in the next line or next sentence, the only person in the CU was an operative or on-operative, when I would usually expect a minimum of 2, preferable 3. Do you know or do you remember who that operative on the CU was?
I don't know who it was.
No. Are you familiar with a watch manager called Daniel Merrick?
I'm familiar with the name, but I probably wouldn't recognise him.
Right. Do you recall a watch manager Kentfield?
No.
No. Do you know a watch manager Kentfield?
No.
You don't. Do you remember what the operative that was on the CU when you went in was doing?
He was sitting at the front end of the CU where they would usually sit to use the radio channels.
Right. Did you see what he was doing?
Not that I remember, no.
Did you speak to him?
I did. I asked him who was in charge.
Right.
And he told me it was Station Manager Brett Loft.
Right, he said it was Brett Loft. Okay. When you spoke to him, you don't remember what he was doing at the radio station?
No.
All right. Now, you say that it was Brett Loft that he told you was in charge. Now, I should just put this to you. Watch Manager Merrick has come to the inquiry and given us evidence, and he's told us, and I'm summarising it, that he didn't know anything about Station Manager Loft's involvement in the incident. So just to go back to your recollection, are you sure that, or how sure are you that he told you that Station Manager Loft was in charge?
I have a clear recollection of asking him who's in charge, because that's the first question as bulk media advisor I want to know. Right. And he said to me, he may have said it is, or I think, but he's definitely said to me, Station Manager Brett Loft.
Do you know Station Manager Brett Loft?
Yes, I do.
Right. And you knew him before the incident?
Yes.
So, I think I know the answer to this next question, but did anybody tell you at that point that Mike Dowden remained in command and Brett Loft was actually in charge of FSG?
No.
Did anybody mention Andy Walton to you as somebody present?
No.
Did you ask the operative where Brett Loft was?
Well, I asked him who's in charge. He told me Brett Loft. I explained to the operative, because it was a 25-pump fire, I was the most senior officer there, I will be taking over. And during that conversation, the Station Manager Loft came onto the command unit.
So, how long after you arrived, just following that last answer up, do you think Station Manager Loft came onto the command unit?
I would estimate to be within a minute or two.
Within a minute or two. Do you know where he came from?
No.
Did you ask him?
No, he came onto the command unit. I explained to him, I said, Brett, it's a 25. I'm the first GM here, so I will be taking over. tell me what you know.
Right, we'll come to that, because we're going to look at that in some detail in a moment. Before we do, can I ask you this? You say in your statement, 6 lines down from the top of page 4, I was surprised because normal protocol is for a watch manager to be in charge up to 4 pumps, a station manager to 6 pumps, a group manager to 10 pumps, a deputy assistant commissioner to 15 pumps, and a director above that. Just on director, what's a director? Is that an assistant commissioner?
Assistant commissioner right. Above, yeah.
So you say you were surprised. Did you check with control whether any other more senior officers had booked in as status 3?
No, I didn't. I was surprised because I'd travelled from South East London to West London that I was the first one there. I knew I'd driven there quickly because of the urgency, but other group managers started arriving very quickly behind me.
Right. So at the moment, is this right, that at the moment Station Manager Loft comes on board CU8 and you see him and discover that he's incident commander, did you assume that you were the first group manager on scene?
I asked the command unit operative, am I the first GM? And he said, yes, Gov.
Right. Did you know that Pat Goulbourne was already there?
No.
Did you know about whether DAC O'Loughlin was already there?
At that point, I didn't know that.
No. Okay. Now, so you took everything you knew about who was present and who was in command from Brett Loft in that short conversation?
Yes, I mean, the conversation was I asked Brett, I think my words were, what do you know? I think this may be where the confusion may have come in, because I told him it was a 25-pump fire, I was taking over, what do you know? He told me very little about what he knew, because right. What he knew was very little actually. But at no point was it made clear that he wasn't incident commander.
Did he tell you himself that he was incident commander?
No.
So you got that from the operative?
Yes.
But not from Brett Loft himself?
That's correct.
I see, okay. We'll come back to that. What I want to do next is to focus on what you did while incident commander. You say on page 4 of your statement, and this is lines 9 to 10 down from the top, that I told the CU operative this, that you were taking over, and requested that a message to that effect be sent to control. I also requested messages to be sent to make pumps 40, declare a major incident, and make CUs 4. And you go on to explain your thinking, we'll come back to. I have a number of questions, though, about those messages. When you made those decisions to send those messages or ask the CU operative to do so, had you yet taken over or had a handover of incident command from Brett Loft?
No.
You hadn't? Now, let's just explore this a bit. Can I ask you to go, please, to the PRC notes, which are at tab 24 of our master documents bundle. And we'll put those on the screen for you. And I want you to look at the manuscript notes at what we have as internal manuscript page 13. This is LFB 3117. And I want to look at the manuscript notes at page 13, which is 4 on from that. So I think relativity reference page 17, Paul. Now, I should just explain what this document is. It's some way into it. This is a record of a PRC meeting in relation to Grenfell Tower, which was held at 8 o'clock in the morning on the 3rd of July 2017. And I believe you were present at it, but can you just confirm?
I was.
You were. And there was a logist taking a note, and we have it in manuscript here. And on this page, we can see your name at the top, Richard Welch, paged at 8pf as BMA, 8-pump fire. BMA we've already explained. Do you remember being at the meeting and speaking about your role?
Vaguely, but yeah, I do remember being at the performance review at command.
Right. And do you remember that what you said was taken down by somebody?
Yes.
In handwriting?
Yes.
Right. Well, did you ever get a chance to review these notes after the meeting?
Sometime afterwards, yes.
Right. Did you make any corrections to them, do you think?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Well, let's proceed and see how we go. 4 lines down, you say, in that note, got on CU, asked who was IC, told it was Brett Loft, told I was first GM, Brett Loft got on to CU, he told me about FSGs, and we'll come back to that. I told him I was taking charge, and I can't read the next, accurate, I think it says 0204, and then he declared major incident, asked the main control Brett Loft. Now, it looks from this as if you took a handover of incident command from Brett Loft before sending these messages. Is that right?
The way I recall it is that I asked the CU operative to send it as one message, or my request was one, of make pumps faulty, me incident commander, major incident, make CUs 4. I believe that to be before I spoke to Brett, but I could be incorrect.
Right. When you were asking the operative to send these messages, were you essentially assuming incident command without yet having had a handover from
Yes.
the person who you were told was the incident commander?
Yes.
I see. And in your statement, just to clarify and perhaps nail this point down, in your statement you say on page 4, in the middle of the page, immediately after the messages were sent, Brett Loft arrived back at the CU. I asked for a handover, current situation, what he'd done. It looks from that you sent the messages even before Brett Loft arrived at the CU, which isn't what the notes of the PRC meeting say. Could you clarify for us?
I think that I gave the instruction to the command unit operative that that's what I want sent around the time Brett came on.
Right.
That's how I recall it.
Okay. So when we look at the notes of the meeting, I just wonder which is which is right. The notes of the meeting that we're looking at say that Brett Loft got onto the CU. He told you various things. You told him he was taking charge, and then you sent the messages. But in your statement, you sent the messages before he got on, you say. And looking back on it now, which is correct? Did you send the messages before he got on or after he got on?
I think I asked for the message to be sent before Brett got on.
Okay. Why would you send those messages before formally taking a handover of incident command from the officer you thought was incident commander?
Because as a high-ranking officer, I could recognise that this was a major incident. And actually, at the performance review of command, it was highlighted positive action for me for actually recognising a major incident. Right. And I didn't, that time of waiting for Brett, the incident commander, to come on and talk to me, for me it was more important to implement major incident procedure and get more resources on their way whilst I can still get that handover, because they're not going to arrive instantly.
I see. Now, I'm going to come back to the details of the handover in due course, Mr. Welch, but before I do, I want to ask you some detailed questions about these messages. Did you ask the operative, we'll call him that, to inform control that you were taking over?
Yes.
And to make pumps 40?
Yes.
And to declare a major incident and make CUs at the same time? Was that a single message?
Within one statement to him, I said, this is what I want you to send.
Right.
It's quite usual that they would be sent in 2 or 3 different messages, but I gave him that whole lot at once.
You did, okay. And did he remain on the CU to do that?
Yes, he did, because I specifically remember a few minutes later turning to him and confirming, have those messages been sent? And he said yes.
I see. Do you remember how long you'd been on the CU when the operative sent the message, or messages?
I would estimate 5-6 minutes maybe, before he confirmed to me that they'd been sent.
Right. Now, I want to look at the way in which each of these 4 requests were actually recorded on the short incident log. So we've got taking command, make pumps 40, major incident, and make command units 4. Can I ask you to be shown the short incident log at page 21? First of all, we've got at page 21 a timestamp of 020341. Make pumps 20. It says make pumps 25. I mean, I think we could all recognise that should say 40. But could you just confirm that for us?
I believe that make pumps 25 I heard en route, so yes, it would be before that.
Yeah. I don't think anyone's said that there's any difficulty about that. And then the next message at 2:04:20, so some 40 seconds, 39 seconds later, there's a separate message, informative, CU7, GM Welch, now IC. Now, I just want to ask you to go back first to the message, because I want to compare them, where pumps are made 40, and hear the audio for that, first of all, if we can, which is audio file 2946. And I may have to play this a few times. It's very short, but what I'm looking out for is who is the speaker. Okay, so Paul, if we could just play that audio file, that's 2946.
What was that? 4, from Charlie from 7, make pumps 40, further traffic over.
Right, and to make it perhaps slightly easier, can I have on the screen at the same time the second hour ORR at page 127 with the time mark of 02:03:13. I've played it to you once just to get the impression of it. Now, if you look at the foot of the page, 02:03:13, it says CU7 sends an assistance message to the radio operator at Brigade Control, FN from Charlie Uniform 7, make pumps 40, further traffic over. So we've got the text up there. Now, Paul, if you play the audio again.
What was that? 4, from Charlie Uniform 7, make pumps 40, further traffic over.
Do you recognise that voice?
No.
You don't? Can you explain why that is said to be coming from CU7, make pumps 40, when you were, as you say, on CU8?
The only thing I can expect may have happened is one of the other operatives from CU7 may have come to CU8 and maybe he's like, can you send this message for me? And he's sending that from the CU7. I have no explanation for that.
Okay. Well, let's look at the next message, which is where you are now IC. This is on the short incident log, it's 02:04:20. Paul, if I can have up on the screen the ORR second hour report, which transcribes that radio message, and that's again page 127 at time mark 02:03:44. Sorry, I've given you the wrong reference. It's page 128. Second from the top, 02:03:44. We'll just highlight that. Now, if we could also play the audio file, which is LFB 2670.
Charlie Uniform 7, Group Manager Welch is now Instant Commander. Charlie from 7.
Again, can you tell us who the speaker was?
No.
You don't.
Evan from Charlie Uniform 8, make CUs 4.
Do you know why that message was sent from CU7?
I can't explain it. You'd have to ask the CU staff, I'm afraid.
You're sure that's not your voice?
Could I hear it again?
Yes, absolutely.
Charlie Uniform 7, Group Manager Welch is now Instant Commander. Charlie from 7.
That's not my voice.
Then, going to the the third of these four, making it a major incident. On the short incident log, it's page 21 with a time mark of 020638. We just nip back to that. It says makeup IUP. Sorry, it's 020638. Sharon Darby, makeup IUP CU8 from GM Welch. This is a major incident. You see that there?
Yes.
Now, we'll put up the text of the message. So you've seen that, got the time mark there. If we put the second hour ORR up at page 135 at 020603. Page 134 it should be. 020603. The text says CU8 sends informative message to the radio operator at Brigade Control, FN from Charlie Uniform 8 from Group Manager Welch, declare this is a major incident, Charlie Uniform 8. If we can play the audio, please, Paul. Sorry, 2507.
FM from Charlie Uniform 8 from Group Manager Welch. Declare this a major incident. Charlie Uniform 8, over.
Do you know who sent that message?
No.
Okay. Did you recognise the voice?
No.
Okay. And do you know why that message was this time sent from CU8, whereas the other two, the first two, have been sent from CU7?
The request that I made was to the staff on CU8.
Right.
How that was then communicated back to control, I don't know.
Okay, well, we can take this last one quickly, which is the makeup of the command units to 4. Just for the transcript, that's page 21 again of the short incident log at time mark 020821, coming from CU8. It's on the ORR at 0205 exactly. We can just put that up there on the screen. It's page 129. There it is, 0205. See you send an assistance message to the radio operator at Brigade Control. FN from Charlie Uniform 8, make CU's 4, Charlie Uniform 8, over. And again, if we can hear that audio file, Paul, it's 2697.
FM from Charlie Uniform 8, make CU's 4, Charlie Uniform 8, over.
Again, do you recognise the speaker in that?
No.
No. I've played you in the audio files and shown you the entry on the ORR because it looks from that two different officers sent these 4 messages, 2 each from 2 different command units. Can you explain, assuming that to be right, why that is?
I can't explain that. As at that point, as I'm taking over as incident commander, my priority is to get that information back to control. I wouldn't get involved in the detail how that gets there. All I want to know is the confirmation that has been sent.
Were you aware at the time you sent the messages or had the confirmation back from the operative on CU8 that they'd been sent, that CU7 was also in attendance?
I do have a vague recollection of seeing CU7.
Seeing it?
Seeing it on arrival, yeah.
But being told about it before you saw it? Do you recall that?
No, I think I saw it first.
Right. Do you remember where you saw it?
Parked in Grenfell Road.
Do you remember whether that was closer to the tower?
Closer to the tower.
So when you parked and went first to CU8, did you go past CU7?
No. Because I came from the other opposite direction. My first command unit I come across was CU8.
Right, but you say you stopped there. You didn't go further past CU7, or did you?
Not until later on.
No.
But as you walk into Beaumont Road, you can see down Grenfell Road.
Yes. So when you went on to CU8, and then worked on CU8, sending those messages, at that stage, did you know that CU7 was in attendance?
I believe so. I couldn't be certain, but I believe so.
How did you know that?
I think I'd seen it on the way walking towards CU8.
I see. So you could see it in the distance?
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
Did you know it was CU7 or just...
It was another CU.
It was a CU, right,
Yeah.
I see. Mr Chairman, it's 11 o'clock, and we've been going for an
Yes.
hour. I'm in the middle of a topic and got some way to go, so now is as good a time as any.
Is it a good time?
Yes.
Well, you'd probably like a break now, wouldn't you, Mr. Welch?
Thank you, sir.
We'll have a 10-minute break. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence while you're out of the room. And we'll resume at 11:10.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you very much. I'd like to go with the usher. She'll look after you. 11:10, please. All right, Mr. Welch, ready to carry on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes.
We were on CU8. Sorry, we were on CU8 and we'd just been discussing the sending of messages. At the point when you were deciding to send these 4 messages, which we've seen and heard, had you at that stage yet stood back and taken a good look at the tower and what was happening?
No, only from all the information I had was what I'd seen on the drive-in,
Right.
and what I'd heard over the radio.
Right. Can I just ask you why you did decide to send these messages, including the major incident message, on the basis of only what you'd seen, I say only, on the basis of what you'd seen on your en route, without going up to the tower and having a good look at it first?
If I can address that in 2 halves for the make pumps faulty and the major incident.
Right.
The make pumps faulty, from what I could see, it was certainly the majority, if not all, of one side was alight. It was clear from the radio traffic that there were persons involved in quite a large number of fire survival guidance calls. So it was going to be a very large firefighting operation, and I felt that maybe 25 pumps wasn't enough. I always work on the basis of I'd rather order more than I need and send them back if necessary, but let's get them there in the first place. So my estimation was 40, and because it was a populated residential block, the major incident call was a discussion I had with Matt Cook, the ORT officer, and Mick Mulholland, and we agreed that actually we were going to need the help and assistance from many other agencies, and therefore it qualified for me as a major incident.
Now, just following up on 2 aspects of that last answer. The first thing you say there is you could see that it was certainly the majority if all of one side was alight. When you say that, which side are you talking about?
The east side.
The east side. What about the rest of the building?
All I remember very clearly is seeing how much fire was on the east side. I don't
Right.
really recall definitely whether the south side had actually caught light by then.
Okay. Can I ask you to look at your contemporaneous note, which is FAO 702, and then go to paragraph or page 1 on that, in that document, paragraph 8 on that first page. And the question is, can you describe the scene on your arrival? And your answer at the top of page 2 was, I could see a high-rise tower block which looked like it was fully engulfed in fire. Now, when you use the expression fully engulfed in fire, given what you just told us, is that correct?
I think that's poor explanation. When I say fully engulfed, I mean from one side, from what I could see.
Right. Now, you made these contemporaneous notes how soon after the incident, do you remember?
About 2 or 3 days after the incident.
Right. So when you use the words fully engulfed in fire, was that a more accurate description of what you recall, given that it was closer to the time you made it, or
I think when I wrote these, it was likely the fact that I'd already seen the incident, I knew how it ended up.
Right.
But the fully engulfed in fire was fully engulfed of what I could see, which was
Right.
one side on the approach.
All right.
It's probably not correct to say it's fully engulfed in fire. It was one side.
Okay, well, we'll come back to fully engulfed in due course when we look at the question of penetration. The second thing which follows on from that answer you gave about making it up to 40 pumps is, what specifically prompted you to decide to go from 25 to 40?
At that point, I was told that we believed it was about 20 floors.
Yes.
And from what I could see, certainly on one side, it was involving every floor, pretty much. And I didn't feel that 25 was enough to deal with that fire or the FSG calls alongside the fire as well. So I thought 40 was more appropriate.
What were you going to do with the extra 15 pumps that you were calling on?
It was clear that it was going to be a majorly extensive breathing apparatus incident. So it was largely for breathing apparatus and firefighting from the outside if we could.
Right. So would it be right to summarise your evidence to say that the extra 15 was going to be primarily, is this right, for search and rescue?
Yes.
And
life will always come first, so the priority was to get the people.
Right. Now, you say in your witness statement on page 4, if we can just go back to it, and it's 15 lines or so down. I considered 50 pumps but decided to get 40. just about 2/3 of the way down that page. We've got it there. As we needed a lot of breathing apparatus, trained personnel, each pump carries between 4 to 6 BA trained personnel. Can you explain why the need to get BA wearers there as soon as possible stopped you from requesting 50 pumps?
So I didn't have all the information I needed at the time. I had a fleeting thought of should I call 50. Also aware that actually we've still had the rest of London to protect. So the more resources we take out, if we had another large incident going on in London, it would impact upon that. So I was comfortable that 40 was going to be sufficient.
Okay. Now, did you, at that stage, give any consideration to whether those resources needed to be EDBA specifically rather than SDBA?
So with when you ask for that number of appliances, you'll get a certain number of fire rescue units come anyway as part of the predetermined attendance. So I knew we'd have EDBA coming. Unfortunately, EDBA, we carry a whole lot more SDBA than we do EDBA. EDBA is quite a limited resource. Right. So I knew it would be on its way and available to me. So the answer is yes, I was aware that would be there.
Okay. And were you doing anything, even at that early stage, to make sure you monitored the number of EDBA wearers that you thought you might need?
Not at that point.
No. Okay. And now, did you think at that stage about requesting more FRUs immediately?
I don't recall thinking that, but I'm aware that I'm not sure if it's a conversation between the ACO Lachlan and myself, but I do recall it quite soon afterwards. FRUs were made 6.
Yes.
But it wasn't. I don't believe that was my call now.
No. So going back to the point about the extra 15 pumps, that would bring you a lot of, is this right, SDB wearers to the incident, but yes, no EDBA wearers?
It would bring a small, I don't exactly know how many FRUs come with the predetermined attendance of make pumps 40, but we'd certainly have at least 2 or 3 FRUs on their way anyway.
Yes, but okay, so at the stage when you made up by an extra 15, can you explain why you didn't at the same time also call for FRUs, given that you, as you've told us, could see that at least the east face of the tower was fully engulfed and you were going to have to effect rescues from the highest floors of the tower? So
we would usually not use EDBA for firefighting. We can do, but we'd usually not. And SDBA in a building that behaves in the way we expect a building to behave would usually be sufficient for that. So EDBA would be a fallback.
A fallback. Right. In your experience prior to Grenfell Tower, had you ever had to, had you ever successfully sent SDBA wearers up some 67 metres?
Not without moving a bridge, not with a bridgehead following up behind it.
No.
I've never experienced anything like Grenfell Tower.
No.
And I don't think any of us have. So there's a lot that happened that night that we've never experienced before in 22, 23 years.
So that prompts my question. When you looked and saw what you needed, and in terms of makeup, the question really is, well, why didn't you also request further FRUs in order to make sure you had enough EDBA wearers to get up to the higher reaches of the tower?
So I was aware we would have some EDBA there, and I think that call would be made on, again, gathering further information when I get to the tower, because we only have 15 appliances that carry EDBA, so even in the initial 6 that we asked for, we're conscious that only leaves 9 protecting the rest of London. So we have to consider the balance between those, and very early on we realised we needed more and we asked for them.
Right. What further information would you need from the tower in order to be able to make the decision that you needed to call in FRUs to provide more EDBAs?
When I got into the tower and spoke to Watch Manager O'Keefe and found out I got a much better situational awareness of where we were, what the aims were, what our difficulties were, then we could start making the calls of other resources that we may need.
Right. But that was later on?
That was when I got into the tower.
But, yeah. Well, we'll come back to that. Did you seek to establish how many FRUs had already been requested, made up?
No, I didn't.
In fact, it looks as if only 2 had arrived at the time you sent your messages, Paddington A216 and Chelsea G346. Does that ring a bell with you?
I don't remember seeing them, but I know they were there later in the evening.
And in fact, if we look at the short incident log at page 21, just go to it, the request for an increased make-up for FRUs wasn't actually made until 211 or so. If you go to page 21, you can see at the very foot of that page, 21146, make up IUP CU8, make FRU 6. I think I'm right in saying that wasn't, and you've confirmed this, that wasn't your decision.
No, I believe that was DACO Lockwood.
That was DACO Lockwood. My question is, why didn't you make that decision earlier?
In the very short space of time that I had to have a mind shift from becoming a bulk media advisor to an incident commander, that was literally a matter of a few minutes. I ordered many other resources I thought I would need, but clearly didn't have time to finish all of my resource requirements because I hadn't gathered enough information about the incident at that point.
Right. Do you recall a conversation with Station Manager Egan about EDBA?
No.
No. You don't remember him saying we need, or anybody saying we need all the EDBA in London, and you saying, right, I'll do it?
No, I remember having that conversation later on.
Right.
With Brian O'Keefe.
Brian O'Keefe. Okay. Now, at the PRC meeting after the incident, if we could just go back to the notes of that. This is LFB 3117, which is tab 24 of the Master Documents bundle. You say, or it is recorded you saying, and this is in relation to MP40, it's 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. Perhaps I should give you the full context. You say, why didn't you MP50? This is next to the Q there, 2/3 of the way down. Why didn't you MP50? Don't know. Believe Andy and Richard handover was 211 because Andy made FRU 6 and CU6 and FRU 10, all by Andy. That's Andy O'Loughlin, I think.
Yes.
And then you say, I considered what we do with the 40, thought 10 pumps per external sector and fight fire externally. And then you say this, still thought fire was just an external face, on external face. Just pausing at that point. Is that right? That at that stage, when you called for 40 pumps, you still thought the fire was on the external face?
Yes.
Exterior. And does that mean that you didn't take a good look at what was actually on fire, even from outside?
Well, at that point, I'd only seen the east side on the way in.
Right.
And so I hadn't managed to get any closer to the building.
Did you ask yourself how you thought that was consistent with what you'd heard over the radio about occupants being trapped in the tower?
Well, at that time of year, it's June, it was warm, you'd expect windows to be open, so I'd fully expect residents would get smoke coming into the building and would panic over that.
Right. Did you ever, at that early stage, hear a message being sent from the control room to the incident ground that there was a fire on the 12th floor?
Not that I recall.
Right. But what about fire on the 22nd floor?
I don't recall specific messages at all.
Before you sent these messages and made pumps 40, did you yourself seek to find out what the conditions were actually like inside the building?
I hadn't at that point, no.
Why is that?
Because, as I said, I arrived as a bulk media advisor, very quickly had to change my thought process to incident commander, and the make pumps 40 was around if it has got into the building, then we're going to need those people, those firefighters in there. But at that point, I had no idea of any fire, or I don't recall any fire spread being made aware to me inside the building.
Did you? But at the time you arrived, you were arriving as bulk media advisor, but you then were taking over, or going to take over as incident commander. And I know you say you did that after you sent the messages, but in sending those messages, wasn't not important for you to establish what the conditions were like inside the tower, as well as what you could see on the exterior?
It is, but my priority was to get more resources and more firefighters there, planning for a worst case scenario that actually we might need all these firefighters in breathing apparatus to go and get residents from the tower.
Right. And did you seek to find out at that point whether crews were actually already effecting rescues successfully?
No.
Again, is there a reason why you didn't?
It was around priority thinking, really, and my priority was to gather all that information before I asked my resources would have delayed the resources arriving. So initially it was to get what I thought the bare minimum that we might need there, and then start doing my information gathering.
Did you think to make contact with the bridgehead, the commanders at the bridgehead, to find out what they were actually doing before you sent these messages?
No.
Again, why is that?
Again, I'd go back to if I ordered the 40 pumps and got information from Bridget and decide we didn't need them, I'd rather be in a position of having to send them back than having to wait that extra time before I ordered them.
Right. But wasn't it important for you to match resources with the actual need as dictated by or understood by those who are at the bridgehead and actually affecting deployments inside the tower?
Yes, it is. But I drew on my own experience of a worst case scenario, just to get the resources en route. And all of this thoughts and decision making was in a very, very short space of time. And there was an awful lot of pressure. And my priority was, let's get what I think we might need.
Right. And would it follow that you also didn't seek to find out whether crews were having any difficulties at that stage getting to the higher floors?
I didn't know that, no.
And again, is the reason the same, that we were just focused on?
I just wouldn't have had the opportunity to get there.
Right.
And, just to find out that piece of information would probably take 2 or 3 minutes.
Right.
And that was 2 or 3 minutes that we were stopping the resources of getting there.
I understand the circumstances, but would it be fair to say that, and tell me if this is not fair, but tell me, is it fair to say that you were bringing on resources really without regard to the actual needs that you'd sought to establish first?
I was bringing resources based on drawing upon my experience of what I thought we may need. In an ideal world, it would be much nicer to find that information out first, but that would always normally happen at an instant. But this was not a normal instant, and that was clear from very early on.
Now, you say not a normal incident, but I think at that stage you still think the fire's on the external face. Does that mean that at that stage you didn't think that fires had penetrated into individual compartments?
I would expect it to have done because of the size of the fire, but just for the fact that it was the outside of the building that was alight makes it not a normal incident.
Right.
That's something I've never seen before.
Okay. Now, going back to your statement at page 4, and we'll come back to the PRC notes in due course, but going back to your statement, 10 lines up from the bottom of page 4, you say that you asked Steve West to compose a methane message to control because I had declared a major incident. And you explain what methane is in the rest of that paragraph. Now, I just want to put something that Steve West says in his witness statement that he's given to the inquiry. He says he started to write the methane message on the whiteboard in the CU, but before he could complete it, he was tasked with setting up Channel 2 as a command channel. That's his recollection. Is your recollection the same, or do you?
I've got no recollection of around Channel 2 being set up whilst I was on the command unit.
Right. Do you recall Steve West starting to write the methane message on the whiteboard in CU8?
Yes, I can.
Did he complete that job?
I don't recall whether he completed it or not, because I then was relieved of command and took on another role.
Right. Now, we can't find any record of that methane message actually ever being sent on the night. Do you know for yourself whether it actually was?
It wasn't sent whilst I was incident commander.
It wasn't sent while you were incident commander. Do you know whether it was ever sent after that?
No. I don't know.
Can you explain what effect the failure to send a methane message would have had on the assumption that it wasn't sent?
I think it's probably easier if I explain the benefit of it, really, because it's a recognised message, recognised format of message across emergency services of the type of incident we've got, and it really sort of breaks down, paints a picture that we all understand of what the incident looks like. So it is important that information is transmitted so that can be shared with other agencies as well.
And if the message hadn't been sent, would that mean that the other agencies would have to play catch-up?
Or it can be sent in a different format. We can still send the informative message, which would paint the same picture, but that's just an agreed format that we have. So I think an informative message would do the same job, but that's the agreed format we should use.
Right. Did there come a time when you realised, from what was happening around you, that that methane message hadn't been sent?
No, I was in the tower very quickly.
Now, can I ask you to go to your contemporaneous note and go to page 2 of that? And look at point 10. You say halfway through the paragraph, and point 10 starts with the question, what were you tasked to do with doing on your arrival? And halfway down that paragraph, you say, I then asked SM Walton to identify a suitable RVP area for oncoming appliances and asked another station manager to begin the process of establishing BA main control. Do you remember speaking with Station Manager Walton at this point?
I have a recollection of speaking to Station Manager Walton, who came onto the command unit. I remember asking him to find a suitable rendezvous point for the oncoming appliances, and I think I actually recommended that maybe we should use Paddington Fire Station for that.
So I think you told us earlier that you didn't recall the involvement of Station Manager Walton.
At the point when I arrived in the command unit, I wasn't aware that Station Manager Walton was there.
Right. But are you saying that he came onto the command unit after you'd been there?
I believe so.
Was that before or after you sent the messages?
After.
Was it before or after you took a handover from Station Manager Loft?
As I recall, it was after.
I see. So was it therefore quite soon after before you left the CU?
Yes.
I see. So you had a face-to-face discussion with Station Manager Walton, did you?
Very, very brief.
Did he say anything to you in that very brief conversation about who was incident commander?
Not that I recall, no.
He didn't say, I'm incident commander?
No.
Right. Do you remember whether he and Station Manager Loft had a conversation together at that stage?
Not that I noticed.
Okay. Now, can I turn then to the topic of the handover from Brett Loft that we parked earlier on?
Yep.
Looking again, if you would please, at the PRC notes, which you were involved in. Again, page 17. You say, halfway down the page, this is after sending the messages, I asked for larger RVP. You see that?
Yes.
Just there. Consider A21. What is that a reference to?
A21 is Paddington Fire Station.
Okay. And RVP, does that mean you were considering Paddington Station geographically or physically as a rendezvous point for something?
For further oncoming appliances, because of the small roads around Grenfell, I was aware that we were going to block up all the roads and we wouldn't be able to get near it, so maybe they should convene there, because quite often an incident like this, it's not actually the pumping appliances we need, it's the personnel.
Yes, I see. So that's not a reference then to the discussion with Andy Walton about RVP for BA wearers?
Sorry, the conversation with Andy Walton and the conversation around the Alpha 21 is the same.
Right.
Because so the RVP that I asked Andy Walton to identify wasn't for BA wearers, it was for pumping appliances.
You are right, and that is what you say in your contemporaneous note. That's my mistake. But the question I think remains the same. Is the reference here in the PRC a reference to the rendezvous point for appliances, which was the subject of your discussion with Andy Walton?
Yes, I believe so.
I follow. Now, moving on down to the next item, you then say, Andy O'Loughlin got on CU and told me he'd taken over from another SM, believed to be 0211. Do you know who that SM was?
I've since known it to be Andy Walton.
But that, on the night, did Andy O'Loughlin tell you who the SM was that he'd taken over from?
No, he just said, I've already taken over.
Right. Did you ask him, well, how come you've taken command from an SM, I've just taken command from an SM?
No, I think the confusion here, what happened was we must have arrived at a very similar time. I've gone to the command unit as per we should and checked in there. But for maybe the direction that Andy approached from, he's gone to the tower first. So he thinks he's taking over there. I think I'm taking over the command unit.
Right. Now, did you seek to explore with Andy O'Loughlin how come he had taken incident command over from Andy Walton, but you had taken incident command over from Brett Loft?
At that point, no.
You didn't. Do you know whether Brett Loft was still on the command unit at the time when Andy O'Loughlin came on?
I don't recall, no.
Did you get a chance to ask Brett Loft how come he was stationed, he was incident commander, when it looks as if Andy O'Loughlin had taken incident command from somebody completely different?
No, at that point that wasn't a priority. We had this conversation that took seconds, and Andy O'Loughlin was of a higher rank than I, so it was just okay. I told him the message I sent. He agreed that actually he was going to intend on sending the same messages.
Right.
So we were on the same page. So then it was move on as quickly as possible.
I appreciate that, but just at that moment, in that very short period, does it mean that there were two incident commanders operating in ignorance of each other's role? The station manager, Walton, from whom Andy O'Loughlin took incident command over from, and Brett Loft, from whom you took incident command over from?
Now, I think the information I was given that Brett Loft was in charge was an assumption, and it was incorrect. So as far as I'm aware, Station Manager Loft never actually thought that he was in charge himself. So there were the two station managers didn't both think they were in charge, because Brett, I think the command unit operative made an assumption, and that wasn't the case.
Right. Okay. Did you know at the time that Brett Loft didn't think he was incident commander?
No, I didn't, and that was never communicated to me. It was days later that I found out Brett wasn't in charge.
But you say you took a handover from him?
I think the words I used were "tell me what you know."
Right.
So maybe I didn't. The words I should have used was "give me a formal handover," and that might have identified him to say, "Actually, I'm not in charge."
So were you assuming that he was incident commander, and therefore assuming you were taking a formal handover?
Yeah, I had no reason to not believe the information I've been given.
Right. Can you just help me? Why were the escalations of command not clearly known to you at the incident?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
The escalations of command, the more senior officers taken over, why was that not crystal clear to everyone at the incident, including you?
So my only concern is the person I'm taking over from. I'm told that the station manager is in charge, so I take over from that station manager. Right. I think there may be a bit of confusion from myself and Andy O'Loughlin. We went to two different places. I went to the command unit, Andy went to the tower. Right. I think that's where the confusion came.
I see. So just to be clear, you didn't actually ask Station Manager Loft, are you incident commander?
I didn't. I said to him, it's now 25 pump fire. Right. I will be taking over. Tell me what you know. Because I just assumed that he was the incident commander, because I had no reason not to believe that. Because
you've been told that by the operator on CU8. You didn't ever explore whether that was right or not?
No.
I see. Now, did you, I think it would follow, the answer is no, but let me just put this to you. It would follow, would it, that as far as you were concerned, you never knew that Brett Loft, although he was senior to Mike Dowden, who was the watch manager who had incident command from the start of the incident, you never knew that in fact Station Manager Loft never took command but left Mike Dowden in charge?
I wasn't aware of that.
Right. You didn't know that is this right, that Brett Loft had taken over the role of handling FSG calls?
I wasn't aware of that either.
Right. Did Brett Loft never tell you that?
Not that I recall.
Right. Now, when Brett Loft came to give evidence to the inquiry, he said that the only conversation he had with you was when you tasked him with taking over BA main control, and that was outside the tower on the southeast corner. That's his recollection.
I'm aware of that. I saw that evidence,
Yeah.
and that's not my recollection at all.
What's your recollection?
Is, as I've said, that Brett, I was told Brett Loft was in charge. He came onto the command unit, and we had the conversation that I've just recalled, and then I asked him to go and start setting up BA main control for me.
Did you ever have a conversation with Brett Loft outside the tower?
Not that I remember, but that doesn't say it didn't happen, because there was a lot going on that night.
Right. My question really is, do you think you could be mistaken about meeting Brett Loft at the command unit?
My memory is quite clear on that.
And do you think you could be mistaken about taking incident command from him?
No, my memory is very clear.
Okay. Now, do you agree that the standard policy requirements, LFB policy requirements, for carrying out a handover under Incident Command Policy 238 require the person taking over to use the words, "I am taking over," or "I am now taking over"?
Yes, I am.
Did you use those words?
Yes, I did.
You did. And did he say anything in response to those words?
No, because I remember saying, "I'm taking over, so tell me what you know," and that's what he told me.
So, I think where we've got to is that your discussion with Brett Loft, you assume is a handover of command.
Yes.
Without actually establishing with him whether he was operating on the same assumption.
Yes.
So you could have been at cross purposes, effectively.
Yes, that's correct.
In fact, it sounds likely as if that you were at cross purposes.
Yes.
Which well, I suppose would mean that although you thought you were incident commander, you actually weren't.
So formally I was incident commander because that's the message you got sent to control.
Yes.
And
By you?
not by me, by the command unit,
On your command?
on my command. And thankfully Andy O'Loughlin, who also thought he was in command, we both had made the same assumption as resources we need. So it had no negative impact on the incident.
Right. Now, in terms of the content of the handover, and I think I'd better put handover in inverted commas because of the cross purposes, but in the conversation, in terms of the contents of the conversation that you had with Brett Loft, where he gave you everything that he knew, can I just ask you to look at page 4 of your statement, 12 lines up from the bottom. Where you say, it was really quick, but I got everything he knew. I told him I was taking over and assigned him to set up BA main control. Just focusing on the words, it was really quick, but I got everything he knew. Can you tell us what you remember, standing here today, Brett Loft was able to tell you?
All I recall is him telling me there had numerous FSGs going on, and that the fire was up the outside the building, and that was pretty much it. They were trying to fight the fire on the outside. I got the feeling that Brett hadn't been there very long either.
Right. And that was it, was it?
That's all I remember, yeah.
Okay. Now, I just want to explore that a bit and just ask you what thoughts you had taking on the role, or you thought you were taking on the role of incident commander, about tactical plans. From what you'd seen so far at the incident and what you knew about the number and location of FSG calls that you'd heard, even in general terms, over the airwave radio on your way to the incident, at that point, when you take over from Brett Loft, did you have any thoughts about what strategies you were going to adopt to deal with what you had seen?
My strategy would be, as with any professional fire officer, would be to reach those fire survival guidance calls as quickly as possible, and remove them from the building or get them to a safe place.
Did you have any thoughts about whether the stay put policy, well, let me ask it this way. Did you know what advice was being given by the control room to FSG callers or any callers who were calling in saying they were affected by smoke, heat or fire?
So fully aware of the stay put policy, and in a residential building like that, the stay put policy would be the default position. And I had no reason to suspect that would be changed at that point.
You had no reason to suspect that it would be changed at that point. From what you had seen and what you'd been told by Brett Loft, even though brief, did you have any thoughts about whether that stay put policy should be revoked and changed with an all-out?
No, I didn't.
Is there a reason why that is?
I had no reason to think that the building compartmentation would be failing and that fire would be spreading across that way, because it's not something that we see. So stay put policy works time and time and time again. So I believe in that policy.
Now, that last answer would rather suggest that you were operating on the assumption that compartmentation was holding up.
Yes.
Did Brett Loft not tell you that there were lots of people trapped in their flats by fire, heat or smoke? And
He told me we were taking a high number of FSGs, but that was about all the information that he had at that point.
Right. At that stage, did you not think it right to ask somebody who knew more about the conditions inside the building in order to establish whether compartmentation really had been breached or not?
Brett was unable to give me that information because I don't believe he had it, and I wouldn't have been able to receive that information until I actually got to speak to BA crews that had come out or speak to the bridgehead.
Did you consider a total or partial evacuation of the building at that stage on the
No.
basis of what you knew?
No, I had no reason to think that was necessary at that point, and that can be quite a dangerous call if the situation and conditions aren't correct.
Did you seek to contact control or ask the operator on CU8 to get hold of control and speak to the operations manager in the control room to find out more precisely what the conditions were like inside the building?
I had no opportunity to do that, just purely because of the timing of the time spent on the CU.
Okay.
A very short space of time with a large number of big decisions made in a very quick succession, and then I was off the CU.
I see. Did you consider whether you had a sufficient understanding at that stage of the layout of the building?
I didn't have that information at that point, no.
Did you ask for it
When I got to the building.
when you got to the building? Right. Did you consider looking at that stage, still on CU8, or finding out whether there was what they call a PIP, a PIP?
There was no opportunity for me to be able to do that at that time.
Right. What about building plans?
Again, there would be no opportunity for me to do that at that time.
Did you have any thoughts about how you were going to evolve some kind of strategy on taking over without knowing what the layout of the building presented you with?
So I would expect people at the bridgehead to have that information. If we haven't got the information available to us at hand, we get that information from residents coming out. But at that point, my pure concern was to be able to resource it enough for us to be able to rescue the people that needed rescuing.
Did you know at that stage even whether the exit route was simply a single main staircase?
No.
You didn't even know that?
No.
So you took over assumed command, is this right? Which wasn't actually command, from Brett Loft on the basis of that really very limited information.
Yes, it was.
Did you think at the time that that was enough information to be able to allow you to form a tactical plan?
It was enough information for me to draw on my experience to call on the resources I thought we may need as a minimum. But yes, I certainly would have liked more and more information.
And I know you weren't there for long, and clearly the situation was what it was. Did you recall in that moment, though, or those moments, policy 341, decision-making model?
Yes, I mean that is our natural way of making decisions,
Right.
and it does give us a very clear breakdown of the things we should consider before making decisions.
Yeah. Can I just ask you very briefly to look at that? It's tab 13 of our policy bundle, and it's LFB 238. Just want to explore one or two things about it. You say it's a natural way of making decisions. Can I ask you please to go to paragraphs 3 and 4? Paragraph 3, it's on page 5. Paragraph 3 says, and perhaps to be fair to you, actually, to start with 2.2, gathering and thinking. The functions within the two main activities of the decision-making model are explained as follows. Gathering and thinking, and you've got deciding and acting, and a rather complicated flowchart underneath it, which we can go through, but it looks like you evaluate and then you inform on progress, gather and think, objectives, plan, communicate, control, outcome. And then under gathering and thinking, it says under paragraph 2.3, it's often not possible to gather all of the information about a task or event before it's necessary to take action. And then 2.4, in seeking to achieve safe systems of work, it's vital that sufficient information is gathered upon which a reasoned decision can be made. In order to achieve safe systems of work, a key factor will be the nature of the task or event and the time pressures that are associated with it. So it gives you the context. But then I want to ask you about information gathering at 3.1. During the initial stages of any decision-making process, it's necessary to gather relevant information. There are 4 sources of information that should be considered. Information on the task event, resources, risk and benefits, and progress. When you spoke to Brett Loft on the CUA, was he the only source of information that would fit with information gathering under this paragraph?
He was the only source valuable to me at that time on the kind of command unit.
Right. What information did you get out of him on the event, task or event?
So my own information gathering before I saw him was it was a high-rise fire, which carries its own issues. The information I got from him was that there was a high number of fire survival guidance calls, and the outside of the building appeared to be alight.
Did you think that was detailed enough to be able to be sufficient information to lead you into the decision-making model?
No, I believe that's the only information that Brett had at the time, and the decision-making model is an excellent tool written into the policy, but policy is a guidance and doesn't always fit every instant.
Right. Now, we know you had information on resources, but information on risks and benefits. Did you think that Brett Loft gave you enough information in that brief handover to be able to allow you to assess risk and benefits for the purposes of operating the dynamic risk assessment?
Yeah, I believe it did, because the risk we had was there was fire survival guidance, and there was people in there that needed us to help them help rescue them. Right. And that was the biggest risk to us.
In broad terms, certainly, but what about some detailed information on differences between callers in the tower so that you could allocate resources accordingly, such as working out where the smoke was, where the fire was, and who was most at risk within the building?
I don't believe Brett had that information to give me. Somebody on the incident ground, well, let me ask it this way, would anybody else on the incident ground have that information to give you, do you think? If that information has been passed from control to us, then yes, that would be given to the vehicle coordinating the fire survival guidance.
Right. My question then is, why didn't you call control in order to supplement the information that Brett Loft had given you so that you could gather the information in order to be able to operate the dynamic decision-making model?
So I knew that information would be coming at some point, because if it's been passed to us, then we're going to get that. But I can't stress enough how quickly all this happened on that command unit. Yeah. Within minutes, all these decisions were made, these conversations were had, and then I was relieved of my command.
Right. And information on progress. Again, same question. Is there a reason why you couldn't have called control or spoken to the bridgehead about the progress of fire survival guidance calls in general terms, so that you could then form at least an outline strategy based on what you knew up to date?
Which is exactly what I did do when I managed to get to the bridgehead and speak to the person in charge there.
Right. 4.1, information about the task or event. The first stage in the process involves gathering relevant information whilst making the best use of the time available it must be recognised that information gathering is the key to effective decision making. The following are some examples of information about the task or event that the person or persons following the process should be considering. What is the environment? What is happening? Is the situation static or developing? What was it that led up to the event? Who is involved? And are there any immediate risks to anyone? In your interactions with Brett Loft and then deciding what to do next, did you get enough information about any of those bullet points there?
I believe I got enough information about the majority of those points there. Further information is always a benefit, but I got enough to make the decisions that I made.
Did you get any detail about specific FSGs from Brett Loft?
No.
In the absence of detailed and specific information about specific floors or even sections of the building, how were you able to have enough information to be able to make a decision, even generally in accordance with the decision-making model?
Because my view was, the decision I made was to ask for more resources than I thought I may even need. But it was to get the resources there, so as that information comes in, if we get that information, we can't actually deal with that information, do anything with it, if we haven't got the resources at the scene to be able to help.
Did you ask Brett Loft, well, is the situation static or is it developing?
It was clearly developing. I didn't need to ask that.
You didn't need to ask that. And having got the information you got, what was the decision that you made as a result of pushing the information through the decision-making model that you say you used naturally?
I didn't have that opportunity. I was relieved of command pretty much at that point.
So does it come to this, that you had what you had, but actually never got a chance to make any decision output? Well, there was no decision output that would have been reached if, in fact, you got to the end of the process.
I didn't reach the end of the process to make a decision output from the information that Brett had given me.
Right.
That was that section of the information I hadn't reached the decision output.
Right. I want to examine in a little bit of detail, if I may, what information he gave you about FSG, if I can. Put the decision-making model policy away for the moment.
Mr. Bennett, can I just ask you, we haven't run for another hour yet, of course, but I expect Mr. Welch would like a break at some point. Would you rather have one now before you start this topic?
Yes, I think that's wise.
Yeah, all right. We'll have a short break, Mr. Welch. 10 past 12. Going to give you 10 minutes to stretch your legs and whatever. And come back at 10 past 12. Please don't talk to anyone about your evidence or anything to do with it when you're out of the room.
Thank you.
All right? Okay, thanks. Right, give the usher. Right, 10 past 12. Right, happy to carry on, Mr. Welch?
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Yes, Mr. Bennett.
Mr. Welch, thank you very much for coming back to us. Can I just pick up where I left off, which was that I wanted to explore with you what information Brett Loft gave you about FSGs when you took over from him, as it were. When he gave evidence, he said that the discussion that you had with him, which he says took place at the base of the tower, I know that's not the same as your recollection, but he says that the discussion was about whether there were firefighters in the tower who were above the level of the fire without any firefighting media. Do you remember that?
No.
You don't remember any discussion about that at all? Is
No.
that right? That was not part of his handover?
I've got no recollection of that
Right.
conversation with Brett.
Now, just in general terms, were you aware that Station Manager Loft had been, up till that point, dealing with FSG calls?
No.
You didn't even know that?
No.
Right. Can I ask you to go back to the PRC notes then? Same page as before, so page 17 of the relativity reference, page 13 internally. A quarter of the way down the page, where you say, told it was Brett Loft got onto the CU. No, just above that. Sorry. Start again. A quarter of the way down the page, Brett Loft got onto the CU. So it's near the top of the screen. Brett Loft got onto the CU. This is 4-5 lines down from the top of the screen. He told me about FSGs. Is that right?
He told me that we'd taken a large number of FSGs.
Right. Do you recall him saying anything else about FSG calls?
I don't remember.
Right. This is a description. He told me about FSGs. Do you remember any detail at all about what he told you?
All I remember is that he told me we were taking a large number of FSGs. He may have given me more information than that, but I don't recall it.
Did you not interrogate him about, well, give me a bit more detail, where are they coming from, what kind of flats, how high in the tower? You didn't?
No, I didn't. No.
You didn't. Is there a reason why you didn't explore the detail of the FSG calls that he'd been handling with him?
Again, if I'd have remained as incident commander, that would be information that I would want.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was the bare minimum of information that he was able to give me, that they had a large number of FSGs. I believe he didn't have that information.
You didn't know because you didn't give yourself a chance to ask him about it?
I didn't ask him, no.
No. But given that FSGs was, as I think you said earlier, the priority over firefighting, wasn't it important to you to extract from him as much information as you could about the FSG calls he'd been handling in terms of volume, content, location in the building, conditions?
So the initial priority for me was those FSGs were being addressed, and I believe I knew they were being addressed. I think if it had been a minute or two later and I kept the command, I'd have been asking him to write up on the whiteboard or gather that information from elsewhere of all the FSG we were getting. What I wanted to know at that point was, were we committing crews to go and get these people?
Right. Let's just explore a little bit more about the detail that you did get from him. If you look at the foot of the page in the PRC notes, you say, or it says, I didn't know how many FSGs, thought 10 or 15. I knew original fire dealt with. And you then go on to say, in the last line on that page, thought FSGs would be dealt with quite quickly. First of all, do you remember saying that at this PRC meeting?
I don't have a clear recollection of it, but it's likely that it's what I said, if that's what's recorded, yes.
Right, you've got no reason to challenge the record.
No.
Right. Do you remember trying to find out from Brett Loft how many FSG calls had actually been taken?
Not that I recall. I remember him giving the information we were taking a large number, but I don't know if he said to me we've got about 10 or 15, but it was totally a much bigger number than I was ever used to.
Right. Because you say here thought 10 or 15, and my question is where does that come from?
I don't know if that's because maybe what I heard on the radio on the way in, or if Brett had actually told me that in that conversation.
Okay. As of June 2017, how many FSGs had you actually experienced at a single incident?
Probably no more than 2 or 3.
2 or 3 you said earlier on. And therefore, 10 to 15 would represent, would it, a magnitude 5 times, up to 5 times greater than your experience?
Yes.
So even on 10 to 15, that would be something, that would have an impact on you, would it?
It would stretch my experience of what I've dealt with before, yes.
Right. And I've asked you this before, but in light of what we now see in the note, did you seek to, I think you didn't seek to establish contact with brigade control to get a feel for what was happening. You've told us that. On the basis of 10 to 15, was that not, why did you not do that?
Brigade control were very busy trying to transmit the information to the command unit of those FSGs. The time that they had was they were doing an incredible job at a really challenging time. So I have absolute faith in control that they will give us all the information that they possibly can.
Right. On CU8, there was an operator doing something. Did you ask the operator on CU8 about what information he was receiving from the control room, if any?
No. I knew that he would be recording as much information as they were able to give him.
Did you seek to find out what systems had been put in place to deal with these multiple FSG calls?
I sought that information as soon as I got into the tower and spoke with the bridgehead.
But that was after you left CU8?
Yes.
Is there any reason why you didn't do that while you were on CU8?
Time. Purely time.
I see. Now, if you look at let me ask this question. I think I'm right in saying that so far you hadn't got any details of any specific FSG calls from Brett Loft.
No.
Now his evidence, and I'm summarising it, is that he was given an A4 sheet on a clipboard which set out FSG calls, and his recollection is that he brought those back to the command unit. Do you remember him having a piece of paper with FSG calls in his hand?
I have no recollection of that. If maybe that was before or after, but I don't remember seeing that at all.
Do you remember?
I couldn't say that he didn't have it on him, but I don't recall seeing it on him.
Right. Do you remember seeing any pieces of paper with lists of FSG calls on them at that point in CU8?
Not at that point, no.
Do you remember seeing any control information forms or other pieces of paper being written on by the operator in CU8?
No, because where they actually sit to use the radios and receive the information from control is behind a small partition wall that has a TV screen on it, so I wouldn't be able to see what they're doing at a desk. I see.
Do you remember seeing any runners or firefighters coming to CU8 and taking away pieces of paper?
No.
Do you remember seeing anybody on CU8 using the radio to communicate with the bridgehead or anybody else on the incident ground?
The command unit operative was using the radio, but I don't know who he was talking to. I didn't recall that information.
Right. Can I ask you to look at, well, first of all, I should ask you, are you familiar with Policy 790, Fire Survival Guidance Calls?
Yes.
You are. Now, can I ask you to look at that? It's tab 5 of our policies bundle. And if you go, please, to paragraph 9.1, which is on page 5, it says, it is vital that control is kept informed of the actions being taken to resolve each FSG call. The fact that control is aware of the actions being carried out on the incident ground will greatly enhance the advice given to FSG callers. Was that principle alive in your mind when you were on CU8 and taking over, as you thought,
Fully aware of that principle, yes.
Yes, you are. Did you do anything to comply with that policy and keep control informed of what actions were being taken to resolve each FSG call?
My priority for getting information back to control was the methane message, and I wasn't allowed the time to be able to get to this part in the process of ensuring that information was getting back to the CU, and is that information getting from the CU back to control.
Right. My question is, was it a priority to you on taking over incident command, having been told by Brett Loft that there are 10, or knowing there are 10 to 15 FSG calls, 5 times more than your previous experience, that the first thing you do is to find out from the tower what actions were being taken to resolve each FSG call?
So my priority would be to ensure that we're committing crews to try and reach those FSG calls. As with many incidents, we trust in our officers. So I had no reason to believe the norm would be to let me know if we weren't reaching them. It would be absolutely expected that if we're receiving FSGs, we were committing crews to those FSGs as we were.
Were you working on an assumption that because, well, let me try and unpick it, what did you actually know in your own head at that moment, at that time, about what steps were being taken to resolve each FSG call?
I knew that we were receiving them, and I had absolute faith in the officers on the incident ground that they would be addressing that and trying to reach those people. If they weren't, the first thing they would do, they would let us know that if they were unable to do that.
So,
if I can just clarify a bit further, yes, as time went on, you would gather the information, what facts we've been to, what haven't we been to, what we're doing about it, and that's all information that you carry on during your continual information gathering. But in those very short few minutes, I did as much as I could for as many as I could, in the sense of are we getting in there? Have we got enough BA to be able to carry on getting in there?
Were you working on an assumption that because the FSG calls had been received, therefore they were being dealt with by crews effectively?
Yes, I was. In the same way that that's comes down to trust and belief in our officers. In that if we attend a fire, we assume they're putting water on it to put it out. So if they were unable to do that, then they would tell us. So yes, I was.
What I'm really trying to get a feel for is why you trusted that or worked on that assumption in circumstances where you were confronted with an incident that you've told us was outside your experience and numbers of FSG calls that were outside your experience. Given those facts, my question is, why didn't you, instead of working on an assumption, pick up the radio or get someone to do so and get some actual hard information from the bridgehead about whether these multiple FSG calls were actually successfully being dealt with?
So that's exactly what I did do when time allowed. I gathered the information from the best source I had, which was the bridgehead. But I've got absolute, complete faith in our officers, and our officers are very, very professional, and I know that they will do everything they can to reach those people, and if they can't, they will tell me. So I was assuming that's what they were doing, because I know that's what they would be trying to do.
Right. And that assumption, is this right, that assumption held good even though you and they, your officers, were confronted with an extraordinary incident?
It's absolutely true, because no matter what we're confronted with, we're never not going to try. So they would always do what's trained in all of us to rescue people at whatever cost.
But trying is one thing, succeeding is another. And given the extraordinary situation you were confronted with, my question really is, well, given that, why didn't you actually seek hard facts rather than relying on an assumption?
It's absolutely right. Trying is one thing, succeeding is another. If they were unable to succeed, then I know they would have told us. I know they would have told us that actually we cannot get to this point or this point or this point, as did later on happen.
Now, I think the next thing you did was to task Station Manager Loft with BA main control. You're right?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember that, tasking SM Loft with BA main control? Yeah. And do you remember tasking SM Kipling, Station Manager Kipling, with that as well?
No.
You don't?
I don't recall that.
Do you know Station Manager
I do know him,
Daniel
yes.
Kipling? Okay.
Yes.
Do you remember his involvement?
I don't recall seeing him at that point of the incident.
Did you discuss with Brett Loft the importance of marshalling EDBA wearers?
No.
You didn't. Did you discuss with him the importance of ensuring that they were sent to the tower on arrival immediately as a priority?
No, at that point, my priority for him was to establish BA main control. Now, that can take a period of time that far exceeded the time that I was in command.
Right. Do you remember Station Manager Egan coming onto the command unit while you were still there, CU8?
I've since seen his evidence that he did, but I don't recall seeing him there.
And his evidence to the inquiry was that he came onto CU8 when he first arrived, and then you tasked him with taking over management of FSGs. Do you remember that?
No.
You don't. He also
Sorry, I recall giving somebody the task of managing the FSGs. I don't recall it being Station Manager Egan.
Right. He also said that you told him to go and set up FSGs in CU7.
I recall telling somebody to do that, but I don't recall it being Dan. I couldn't. It's a faceless character in my memory.
Okay, but you do remember telling somebody to go and set up FSGs in CU7,
Yes.
do you? Right. Why did you do that? Why did you say that the FSG should be handled from CU7 and not continue to be handled from CU8?
Because it is our common practice that we would have a dedicated command unit purely dealing with FSGs, and the command unit that I was on was what I believe to be the instant command unit.
Why not make CU7 the command unit?
It would have been an option, but at that point, that's where the hub of activity was around the whole incident. And for the FSGs, it's vital we have absolute 100% concentration.
Yes.
So a command unit that had nobody else on it at that point, as far as I was aware,
Right.
seemed like a perfect location for it.
We've covered this earlier this morning, but just go back to it. At the stage when you told Dan, or told somebody, to go and set up CU7 as the FSG unit, were you aware by that stage that FSG calls were coming in from control to the incident ground to CU8?
I wasn't aware, I wasn't consciously aware they were coming to CU8. I knew they were coming to the incident ground.
I see. Can you explain what information you were able to give the person you tasked about the FSG calls that had come in so far that they were going to go and set up in CU7?
I don't recall giving it that information. I clearly remember asking someone to set up FSG in CU7, CU nearest the building, but I don't recall what other part of that conversation we had.
Right. So you weren't able, would it follow that you didn't, perhaps weren't able to give them a briefing about what systems for handling FSG calls were already in place?
I don't think it's fair to say that I didn't. I don't recall what further conversation we had.
Now, one of the operatives of CU7, Watch Manager Harrison, Norman Harrison, who ended up working on CU7 with Dan Egan, he says that he recalls coming onto CU8 not long after his arrival at the incident, and there were 3 senior officers on the CU, 2 station managers and 1 group manager. Sort of a lot of material to take on board. My first question is, do you know or would you recognise Watch Manager Norman Harrison?
I would probably recognise him, but I don't remember. The name doesn't mean anything to me.
Do you remember whether he came on to CU8 when you were there?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Now, let me see if I can trigger a recollection in a different way. He says in his statement to the inquiry, and this may have to be explored with him, but he says that when he was on CU8, he announced to everyone that he thought the advice being given by the control room operators to tell people to stay inside, stay put, ought to be changed, and that there was then a discussion about that. Do you have a recollection about that?
I've got absolutely no recollection of that, and I think if I'd have heard that conversation, that is something that I would have been able to recall.
Okay. Now, in your statement, if you go back to page 4, please, 4 lines up from the bottom, you say, at this point, DAC Andy O'Loughlin entered the CU, and this has probably got garbled, I became aware that he had arrived before me, but gone direct to the block and had taken charge from Station Manager Andy Walton, although no messages had been passed to control about that. To be clear, is this after you'd requested the 4 messages that we discussed to be sent?
Yes.
Right. And how long after those messages were sent do you think DAC O'Loughlin came onto the CU?
I would guess a minute or so.
Right. Was that before or after you had your handover from Brett Loft?
After.
After. So that would mean, would it, that you sent the messages and then had the handover from Brett Loft, and then DAC O'Loughlin arrived, all in the space of a few minutes?
Yes.
Is that right? I mean,
that's how I recall it, yes.
Right, okay. Now, in the PRC notes, just to go back to them, and this is a timing question, you say halfway down, Andy O'Loughlin got on CU and told me he'd taken over from another SM, believed to be 0211. Now, why do you... Well, first of all, do you remember saying at this meeting, this PLC meeting, 3rd of July 2017, that you believed that that was at 211?
No, I don't.
Do you know what... If you did say it, what would have prompted you to recall that being the time when Andy O'Loughlin got on the CU?
I would suspect that that's probably been recorded following some conversation at the PRC of trying to work out where everyone was at what time.
Right.
I think you'd have to ask the person who wrote these notes whether that was for me or for their own record.
Now, at 0211, it's certainly after you'd sent the 4 messages. Just to see if we can pin this down, can I ask you to go to the short incident log, tab 23, Paul, at page 21. We might be able to work it out from this together. At 021146, foot of the page, you can see that Sharon Darby inputs a make-up message, IUP CU8, make through 6. Who made through 6?
I believe that was DAC Andy O'Loughlin.
Right. So, does that tell us, does that give us a time mark for when he came on to CU8?
I would think that's quite likely, yes.
I mean, don't speculate.
No, I think it probably is, yeah.
But to the best of your recollection.
Yes.
Do you remember him giving the instruction to the operator on CU8 to make through 6?
I have a vague memory of the words being used, make FIU 6.
Right. Now, going back to your statement, you say, and I've just shown you this, he told you he'd taken charge from Station Manager Walton, and we've seen paragraph 10 of your contemporaneous notes where you had a conversation with Station Manager Walton about setting up a rendezvous point for incoming appliances. We've seen that this morning. My question is, when you spoke to DAC O'Loughlin, did you ask him who was incident commander at that point?
Not that I recall, no.
What assumptions did you make at that point when you first saw him as to who the incident commander actually was?
As far as I was aware, it had been Brett Loft, and then I'd taken over until Andy O'Loughlin arrived and said, actually, no, he had taken over at the block. Right.
Now, 4 lines up from the bottom of the page, we've just looked at it. You say, it says, I because aware. I think it should be, I became aware that he had arrived before me. How did you learn that DAC O'Loughlin had arrived before you?
Because the brief conversation we had was when I told him I'd taken over, he said, well, I've already been to the block and taken over, so from that, I surmised that it was either at the same time as me or before me.
Oh, I see. So you learnt it from him,
Yes.
not from anywhere else?
No.
Right. What briefing were you able to give DAC O'Loughlin?
Well, from the brief conversation we had, it was clear that he had more information about the actual tower than I did. So my addition to his information was what I'd done at the command unit by requesting more resources, declaring major incident.
Right. Given that he'd taken command from Station Manager Walton, well, let me ask you this. During that conversation, you clearly became aware, as you say, that he'd taken charge from Station Manager Andy Walton. Did you have a conversation with DAC O'Loughlin along the lines of, well, hang on, how come? Because I've just taken command from Brett Loft.
No, because it became quite clear that he made it clear to me that he'd gone straight to the tower and I'd gone straight to command unit, so it was clear where the confusion had happened.
Right. Did it cause you concern to discover that there had been some confusion in who people thought the incident commander was?
It's unusual, and it's not the way we normally do things by any means. But the important thing was to resource the incident. That's something that can be dealt with afterwards, and we can talk about that as we did at the PRC of how that confusion happened. But that had no detrimental effect on the incident, and as I said earlier, we were both on the same page. So whilst it wasn't good practice, it hadn't caused any problems either.
Well, you say it hadn't caused any problems. How did you know that?
Because our view on what we needed to resource that incident was the same.
Okay.
So my decisions had no detrimental effect on his command decisions, because all I was done was resourcing what he thought he needed as well.
Right. Okay. Now, did he give you an impression or an understanding about what he had learned so far about the incident?
More so when he then detailed me as being a fire sector commander,
right,
and told me what the extent of the fire was and therefore what the size of my sector would be.
Okay, well, we'll come to that shortly, but in this conversation, were you able to talk to him about the number and location of FSG calls?
No, only that I told him that I was aware that we had a high number of FSG calls. He confirmed that, and then I told him that who I'd given each role to set up FSG, to set up BA main control, etc.
Did you have a discussion with him about how FSG information was getting to the bridgehead?
No.
Did you have a discussion with him about how many BA crews had been committed so far?
No.
Did you have a conversation with him about how high BA crews had been committed into the building?
I don't believe I had that conversation with him. I did have that conversation shortly after, but not with him, I don't think.
Did you have a conversation with him about whether there were any particular floors above which BA wearers were not getting? No.
All of that information was being held at the bridgehead. Now, it wasn't to say that Andy wasn't aware of it, but that was my source of information that I needed to, that was the priority for me to get there.
Okay. He had been into the tower. Did he give you any kind of impression as to what was actually happening at the bridgehead?
He didn't, and I wasn't aware that he had been into the tower at that point.
He didn't tell you, did he?
Not that I recall.
I thought he did. Did he tell you what the firefighting plan was?
Not that I remember.
Did you discuss evacuation?
Not that I remember.
Did you discuss the wisdom of maintaining the stay put advice?
No, again, I don't recall, and all of this, I can't say it didn't happen. I don't remember having that.
Right. What did he tell you?
I told him what I'd done. He told me he'd taken over from at the tower, so therefore I knew that he had more information about the incident at the tower than I had. So in effect, really, all I did was add to his information gathering to assist him to make command decisions.
And what information did you give him?
What I'd done on the CU around the increase in resources and declaring a major incident. That's all, is it? I told him about, I knew we had a high number of FSG calls. He confirmed, yes, we have. And so it was more me feeding him information.
Did you have a conversation with DAC O'Loughlin about the nature of the fire spread at that time?
We may have done. We may have had a conversation. It appears to be on the outside, but I couldn't recall for definite that conversation.
Just follow that last answer in a bit more detail. If I can ask you to go back to the PRC. notes, same page, page 17. We've seen 5 lines up from the bottom already this morning that you say still thought fire was just an external fire. And then a line up from the bottom you say, I knew original fire dealt with. Sorry, I'm so sorry, my mistake. Immediately underneath the line where it says thought fire was an external face, I knew it was cladding alight. Did you have a conversation with DAC O'Loughlin about what you thought was a light, namely the cladding?
No, I think it's unfair and incorrect, my comment there. I think that's in reaction to media coverage following the fire.
I see. So at the time you didn't have any...
I knew it was the outside.
Right. So you think the reference to cladding there is wrong, is it?
It's probably, it's not fair to say that. That was reacting to media coverage.
All right. But then still focusing on still thought fire was just on external face. Were you in this meeting when Andy O'Loughlin gave his version? Do you remember hearing that?
Yes.
If you turn to page 19 of the PRC note, you can see where he starts his report of his own recollection of the incident there, and just below halfway down, it says, I was surprised I was taking over from Andy, a station manager. Andy had only just taken over. I think that's Andy Walton, from what we've been able to gather from you this morning. Do you remember, in your conversation with DAC O'Loughlin when he came onto the CU, him telling you that he'd been surprised to take over from Andy Walton, who was a station manager?
No, I don't.
You don't. And it says, was clear where fire started. Fire was in flats. No clear indication of how many involved. Do you remember having a discussion with DAC O'Loughlin about whether the fire had penetrated from the exterior into individual flats?
No. Andy would have been given the same information as I would suspect that it was in a specific flat initially, which I would suspect that's probably what he's referring to there.
Well, the note says fire was in flats, no indication of how many involved. Obviously, we'll have to ask DAC O'Loughlin about what he meant by that, but my question, just showing you what he said at this meeting, and based on what he said at this meeting, is that when you spoke to DAC O'Loughlin when he came on to CU8, did you have a discussion about whether the fire was still only on the exterior, as it appears you thought from what you were saying at the meeting, or had actually penetrated into flats, plural?
I don't recall that conversation.
Okay.
I think put it in context is important to say that it wouldn't be unexpected for it to be in flats, and it's quite, seeing it as the fire started in a flat, and as the time of year and everything else that lock windows open, it wouldn't be that unusual to see the fire then spread to a flat above, maybe even a flat above that, because the fire will come out and get back in to search for fuel. But what was completely different on this night was the outside of the building was the fuel, where normally the fire will only try and get back in to find more fuel. And I think that's the big difference between what we're used to and what we saw on the 14th of June.
Right. So that leads me to this question. At that stage, so we're on CU8 and you're talking to DAC O'Loughlin, who's just come on, did you have any thoughts yourself or any discussion with DAC O'Loughlin about whether the fire, even if only on the exterior, had breached compartmentation?
No, we didn't. I don't remember having that discussion. But as I say, I wouldn't have been surprised to learn that it would have got into flats because mainly because of the time of year, windows open.
Summarising it, was your view at that stage that compartmentation was still holding up, or was your view that compartmentation had begun to fail?
So at that point, I had no reason to doubt that compartmentation was still holding up. As I say, it would have got back into the flats, but then each flat is its own compartment, and I had no reason to believe it was breaching outside of those compartments and spreading internally.
Okay. Now we're going to come to look at that in a moment, about what you saw on the outside when you go to the tower. And I appreciate that at this stage you hadn't had a good look at it. So we'll come back to that. DAC O'Loughlin says in his witness statement, and again we'll have to explore this with him, his recollection with him, but he says that he told you that he had asked, he had requested FRUs so that the EDBA crews would be able to get to higher floors. Do you remember yourself being told that by DAC O'Loughlin?
No, I have no recollection of that.
Do you remember DAC O'Loughlin telling you how many FRUs he had requested prior to coming onto the CR?
No, I seem to recall being present when the request was made for make FRU 6.
You were. And at that time, was it clear to you that he was the incident commander?
Yes, we'd had that handover and he'd taken control.
Right. And he therefore had two handovers, one from Andy Walton earlier, and now a supposed handover from you.
Yes.
Right. So he's, in your mind, he's incident commander at or by 211 when he sends that FRU 6 message.
Yes.
Right. Now, can I take you back to your statement, page 4, and over to the top of page 5? You say that he told me, this is the bottom of the page, that he had made SM Walton Fire Sector Commander, but he now wanted me in that role and told me my parameters were the whole block. What did you understand that you were specifically being asked to do in terms of an overall strategy?
So I was given the role of Fire Sector Commander. As Fire Sector Commander, you'd normally be given an area which in a higher rise would be the fire floor, one above, one below. It made clear to me that actually because it involved the whole building, then the whole building was the fire sector. We discussed, I couldn't tell you the details, but we discussed it at that time, this is what we've got to so far with it, and then I made my way into the building to gather more information.
Right. Did he give you any indication of whether you needed to be focusing on rescues or focusing on firefighting?
He wouldn't need to give me that information. That's our first call is always life, therefore rescues would always come first.
Did he give you any indication as to how you should be deploying your BA resources? EDBA, SDBA, focusing on which was more important?
No, his role as an incident commander would be to have an overall plan. It would be the Fire Sector Commander's job to start looking at the detail of that plan, the best way to carry that plan out.
Did he give you any impression as to what the conditions were like inside the building at that stage?
No, not that I recall.
Did you ask him?
I didn't. I wasn't aware that he'd been in the building.
Now, we get to the point when you leave for the tower with your brief from DAC O'Loughlin to run the fire sector. We've gone through this morning this question of who was incident commander, and there being two, or apparently two at the same time. And you said it didn't have any, what didn't cause a problem because you were still resourcing the incident. I'm summarising your evidence. Is it right that neither you nor DAC O'Loughlin knew what the other was doing for a period of time before he came onto the CU and you discovered that he was IC?
Yes, that's true. But the reality of it is that actually we were actually both doing the same thing. We both recognised the need.
And if does that mean that neither of you knew what the other was thinking, seeing in terms of how the fire was behaving?
DSO Lachlan was getting a better view of that than I was.
Right.
I took the steps of resourcing the incident as quickly as I possibly could, but it was actually DSO Lachlan who had probably more information than I around how the fire was behaving and what was happening in the tower.
Right. When you discovered that he had effectively been incident commander for a period of time before you saw him on CU8, did it occur to you that that might have caused a problem because you were resourcing the incident knowing less than what he knew, or perhaps different things from what he knew?
It had the potential to cause a problem, certainly, but one of the very first part of the conversation we had was when I told him the resource I'd asked for, and he confirmed that's exactly what he intended to do. Right. So that dismissed that concern, because actually we were both doing the same thing. In fact, it probably made it quicker because I ordered it before he had the opportunity to order it. So some time was saved there because we were both ordering the same thing, but I'd done it faster than he could get that message back.
Right. But you didn't know what his view was about whether there was failure of compartmentation?
No.
Nor his view about what the status of any individual rescues or deployments was?
No.
Or how he was reacting to the volume and content of the FSG calls?
I didn't, but once we shared that information, he was reacting the same way that I did react, asking for the same assistance.
And what, if anything, did you do? Perhaps I should ask this. Did you do anything to put Brett Loft and DAC O'Loughlin together so that Brett Loft could give DAC O'Loughlin a clear and detailed brief about FSG call handling and content and detail?
So I don't believe that Brett had that information at that point. I believe he gave me as much information he'd received. But whilst setting up BA main control, whilst waiting for further command units to arrive, his role would be at the command unit doing that. Yeah. So unlike I, who was going to leave the command unit, head for the tower, Brett was going to be at the command unit.
Right.
So I didn't formally put them together because that's not the normal thing to do. You would normally take your hand over from the person you're taking over from, which with Andy and I, initially it was Andy Walton for him and then from me. But the opportunity was there if necessary.
Right, you say the opportunity was there. What did you do to ensure that that opportunity was taken so that DAC O'Loughlin, so that you were satisfied in your own mind that DAC O'Loughlin had got as much information about FSG call detail as you could get from Brett Loft?
So it goes back to the fact I have faith in my officers, and I have faith that Brett Loft gave me as much information as he had, and I then gave that on to Andy.
Right.
So as far as I was concerned, I trusted Brett. He told me everything he knew, and I passed all the information I had to Andy.
What did you tell Andy O'Loughlin about FSG calls? Do you remember?
That we had a large number of them coming in. There may have been more information that Brett gave me that I passed on, but I don't recall it now.
And did you have a discussion with him about what the route of FSG information was from control room into the incident ground, from the incident ground up to the bridgehead?
Not that I recall, no.
I'm going to turn on to the next topic, which is your move to the tower with Gareth Cook and Mick Mulholland that you describe in your statement. Mr. Chairman, I might be able to get through this in 6 minutes, but I might not. Well, it may be sensible to have a break now, and or I can try.
No, I suspect you're right. It'd be more sensible to have a break now, wouldn't
it? Yes, and actually, can I make this point? About 3 minutes into this line of questions or so, I am going to be showing a photograph to the witness, which is of the building on fire. And so I ought to give that as a trigger warning, so that if anybody is not comfortable about seeing a photograph, it is a still, of the building on fire, they perhaps ought to excuse themselves from the first 10 minutes to make it sensible.
Yes, but I think you ought to repeat that warning.
I'll do that as soon as I come in.
Because people may have come in who won't have heard it now.
Yes, good idea.
Now, Mr. Millett, just tell me, how are you getting on? Can we say 2 o'clock or should we say 5?
I think we can say 2 o'clock. Treat ourselves to an extra 5 minutes.
Good, thank you. Right, we're going to break now then. Mr. Welch has some lunch. We'll resume at 2 o'clock, please, and don't talk to anyone, please, about your evidence while you're out of the room. All right? Thanks so much. I'd like to go to the usher. Right, 2 o'clock then, please.